Hi folks, with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about tax. Now, the Donald Trump team has been floating some interesting ideas about reforming the tax system. Now, I guess every time a major election takes place, tax reform is one of the things that's waved around, but nothing quite as comprehensive as the Trump team is talking about. Now, whether or not they can do some or any of these things remains to be seen. But let's just have a look at taxation as as an issue. The idea of income tax as a permanent sort of thing is really only been around for not much more than 100 years. It typically would come up, say, in times of warfare, where the typical or standard revenues that a government may rely on would either be reduced or affected in some way, especially where and most of the taxation revenues came from trade. So things like import duties, export duties, those sorts of things, and then monopoly taxes on things like, say, salt. Salt being an essential, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, essential for curing and preserving things like meat and so on. That was typically the source of revenue. Now, revenue was also, say you wanted a road, you needed a road to go from A to B, the classically referred to turnpike. Somebody would build the road, and if you wanted to use it, you had to pay them a toll or a fee for using the road. And that was typically, it was those sorts of things that were the revenue generators, the idea of an income tax. Given too that the majority of people did business based on barter or lived, in terms of their daily existence, they lived pretty much a hand-to-mouth subsistence type thing. So it wasn't really. It was only when money became a transaction that you'd pay tax. Now, not that tax wasn't exacted in other ways. For example, the owner of the thousands and thousands of acres of farmland may say to you that, okay, peasant working on my land, you have to give me so many bushels of wheat or so many crates of apples or something each. So there would be, so that's a form of taxation, but it's ineffectively goods in lieu of or in the wider sense a barter system. Now, if you wanted to use the aristocrats, say windmill that would grind your grain, if you want to do that, the aristocrat, so you can grind your grain here, but you got to give me 10% of all the stuff the flour that you grind out of the grain. Or if you want to use my horse and cart to take your fruit and vegetables to the village market, you got to give me 10% of whatever you make out of that. So those sorts of things. So, but the idea of sort of nationally organised, structured taxation and so on, again, is a fairly recent thing. And to whatever extent it did exist, such as say when the British were fighting the Napoleonic Wars, as a case in point, they would levy quite a small tax. I think it was less than 5% of income. There were various stamp duties on say property transactions and so on, those or on legal documents. In fact, it was part of the one of the primary reasons, really, that the American colonists rebelled, was the British government trying to impose things like stamp duty taxes on legal documents or taxes on imported tea and things of that nature, the Boston Tea Party and so the idea of a standardized national income tax system, again, just coming back to is relatively new. Now, the idea of taxing income, it seems to go against the grain of libertarians to some degree, but what other form of tax can you have? So let's suppose tomorrow that income tax was abolished in say the United States. That doesn't mean that the requirement for government revenues just disappears, that there's no need to raise money through taxation. So what else could you do? Well, you could have like a sales tax or goods and services tax, as it's sometimes called, and everything. And that would at least give discretion to people. Then you only pay tax based on your consumption choices. Now, provided the tax wasn't levied on the essentials of life, for example, it's not levied on I don't know, rent or something, or putting a roof over your head. It's not levied on basic foods like bread or milk, or that type of stuff. So as long as it's not levied on the essentials of life, but on consumer choices, then it's probably going to be a much fairer tax than say an income tax. Now, the reality is that people on lower incomes don't really pay any tax. Once your income drops below a certain level, that the amount of tax you pay is negligible. I mean, for example, say someone on an income of I don't know, $30,000, say in Australia, their tax is about $2,000 annual tax on the 30,000. Now, at 30,000, they're also eligible for quite a lot of government programs, which pay them more money than the tax they pay. So they're actually not paying tax. So technically or theoretically, they're paying income tax. But the reality is that in the overall social welfare system and the ebbs and the flows of that they're actually not paying tax. In fact, on top of their income, they're getting quite a bit more money being paid to them. Now, that money can only be paid to them because tax is being gathered from other people. So again, once you look at that central pool of taxation, revenue collection, income tax, and other taxes, corporate tax, then how can you get rid of income tax given that it makes such a large proportion of the total revenue? There's not many countries where personal income tax is even less than half the total tax take. So in order to get rid of income tax, there would have to be many other adjustments in other places in that that interactive sort of equation or matrix. So corporate taxes would have to go up. Import duties and taxes would need to go up. There's a whole lot of other taxes would need, again, sales tax or consumption tax would need to be imposed in order to make up the difference. The patterns of consumption also would change given the nature of tax. And they would have other unforeseen effects, knock-on effects of a change that substantial. So I don't know if it's even, technically it's possible. For example, if you had a 150% consumption tax, you probably could replace income tax, but 150% consumption tax would radically alter the pattern of consumption, what would be consumed. People would think twice before buying something on the basis that it had such a heavy tax on it. Would that then raise the value out of sight of second-hand goods, used products? Or would they suddenly acquire a new value because that wouldn't be taxed? Could you then tax second-hand goods? Would the amount of barter increase in certain areas which couldn't be taxed? And so on. So there'd be a number of knock-on effects of this. But is it an idea worth exploring and thinking through? Well, I think so. One of the things, I guess, about income tax that certainly annoys higher income or people capable of making a higher income is that in order to be able to get that job, you already have to pre-agree, and already that the government is going to take half of what you make, and yet you're the one working and toiling for that. Why should the government get half of what you work for? These are valid considerations. Now, in an overall socialist system, the idea is that the most capable, who produce the most, pay the most, and then that central pool of revenue, income tax, is then redistributed to those that need it more. That could be the elderly or the infirm or the less capable. But it also, by extension, also goes to the lazy and the don't care and the can't be bothered. And it goes to a lot of unproductive people who don't give a shit but still want the handouts. Now, there are other proposals that Trump's made, or his team, and that he's mentioned in media interviews and rallies and so on about not taxing overtime and things like that. I think that's got a lot of validity. if someone's got a second job, maybe they pay a lower tax rather, and looking at those sorts of things, some incentive to work. Now, some of you probably remember the Laffer, Laffer, the Laffer curve, which says that there's a point at which, when you heavily tax people, that they think it's not worth working anymore. They'll just do minimum amount. Why should they work hard, and why should they bust their ass if they're going to get taxed on everything they make, and they're only going to be left with a small amount. And that's I understand that. And the reverse is the case, where the less you tax people, and there's a certain threshold or maximum return in both sides of this curve, whether it's the tax going up or the tax going down. There's a point at which workers are prepared to put in maximum time, effort, and energy to make money on the basis they can keep most of what they earn, and they're prepared to give some away for what in effect is charitable reasons. Now, the other factor that sort of is the massive growth in government. I think we've all sort of looked at, we go into, certainly I do, whenever I go into government departments, I'm staggered at how many non-productive people there are. Or when I go and say a government thing to renew, a passport or a driver's license or some sort of corporate registration, or that sort of stuff. If I go in sort of in the morning, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll wait forever to get, and everyone seems to be sitting around chatting and doing nothing. And I went, well, why can't, there's 10 windows for service, because only 2 of them are open. What are these other people doing, given that there's a shitload of people standing in line? But if I go in and say closes at 5, now they close the doors at 10 to 5. But if I go in at 12 minutes to 5, then suddenly every window is open, and they're processing the stuff really quickly. They're not being difficult. They're not asking snotty questions or getting in my face or anything like that. They just want to process the paperwork, and it's bang, 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 and it's done. So that they've got the ability to be efficient and get it all done, but they, for some reason, choose not to. Now, there's an interesting one I was looking at recently. There was a department in England or Britain in 1840, and there was a government department that had 600 people working there, and now they had quite a large empire and so on to administer. So those 600 people must have been, I don't know, reasonably busy, I guess. Now that same department today has 60,000 employees, and there's no empire to administer. So what actually are they doing? Are they shuffling paper back and forth to each other? Are they arresting people for misuse of pronouns or something? What do these people actually do? How could 600 do it so efficiently before, without computers or telephones or anything like that, whereas 60,000 can't seem to do it with all the modern technology available today? So we've seen a massive increase in income. So a lot of the tax revenue has gone into employing people who may otherwise not be employed, employing people in government to do nothing, but they're getting paid a wage, and then they go out and they buy consumer goods and all this sort of stuff. So that there's kind of a recycling of money. So money's being gathered, then recycled back into the economy, not effectively or not efficiently rather, or productively, but it is being recycled. So economic mass can be maintained, even though it's not, again, efficient or productive. So if government revenues to be substantially altered, and we don't know how it would go, again, we don't know what the consumption patterns might be. You can guess at it, but if I want to buy I don't know, a book or something that's $20, with a consumption tax of 150 or 200%, that book may be instead of $20, maybe $50. So I may choose not to buy it. I say, well, if I wait a year or two, I can pick that up as a second-hand book for $5 or something, that type of thing. So we may all start making decisions about consumption that can. And now, if things aren't being consumed, then the tax revenue wouldn't be there, the tax take to replace the lost income tax. So there would need to be other adjustments elsewhere. Maybe corporate tax would have to be increased. that wouldn't seem to be a good idea. So there's probably a limit to corporate tax. If the corporate tax is increased, then corporations will demand monopolies. They'll demand, cheap peasant third world. So that, again, there are adjustments. The thing about the economy that people always seem to miss is that you adjust something in one area, then it has a knock-on effect, which then changes the conditions in 10 other areas, and then you have to look at those. So it's not a case where you can just push a button and that's one effect, one problem solved or one thing changed. It has multiple knock-on effects in a matrix going all directions, and this can rarely be foreseen. One of the things that's always amazed me about hitting men up with alimony and child support, men just on ordinary incomes, we're not talking Hollywood gazillionaires here, that the guy's already paying 50% tax, and they want to hit him with 30-35% child support and alimony, so he's only left with 15% of his income. And then they wonder why these guys drop out and just don't work anymore. They just work as street sweepers making nothing, or window cleaners, or toilet cleaners, because it's just not worth their while working. And the people observe this, just scratch this. Well, I don't know why why is that happening? I don't know why he doesn't want to work anymore. But it's obvious why. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to work that out. Do I think it's possible to remove income tax? There's just too much invested in all these cherished social programs that the politicians have, and they're going to donate money to build a new stadium or to a new lesbian painting class in the downtown. All this sort of stuff. The money has to come from somewhere, and the surety, the guaranteed river of gold that income tax provides, then I don't think they'll let go of that easily. And again, the only places they can make it up is either in tariffs on import, export, or a consumption tax of some sort. Those are really the only places they can go to. You can't push corporate tax up really much more than where it is. And again, if you do, they're going to demand things in return, such as monopolies, which is not good. Competition is how you keep products improving and prices down, not giving monopolies. That's the worst thing you can possibly do. Even when Donald Trump talks about putting tariffs on imported goods, that's fine. I think it's a great idea, by the way. But he's got to get a quid pro quo agreement from any business or company or group of companies that's being protected by these tariffs. Okay, I've given you the protection. You've got the local market yourself, but you must produce the products at a world quality standard and at a world competitive price. You can't use these tariffs to just create fat and blubber and inefficiency. That's not what it's for. It's just quality products at a good price for the American people. That's what you have to go and find export markets. This idea of you can use the tariffs to just become lazy and inefficient. So Trump really needs to strongly enforce that point, that in return for tariff protection, they got to deliver quality product at a competitive price. So this is the overall scheme. I think no tax on things like overtime and tips. I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. There's a huge pool of workers in the Western world, older workers, maybe people over the age of, I don't know, what's retirement age now? I think it's like in Australia, it's 66 or 67 now. So, people at retirement age, they, or after retirement age, maybe they work with, almost no tax. Maybe that's not taxed. They're not taxed. But to bring talented, capable people who are still fit and able to work out of retirement to build up the economy. So maybe 10% tax, something like that. But to bring these people back. Also, people who've been unemployed for a while. Say you've been unemployed for more than, 12 months or something like that. Maybe those people can have a 12-month grace period where they pay a much reduced income tax. If you start up a new business, you get a grace period for not paying tax and these sorts of things. So, let's create a really talented, hardworking, vibrant, productive economy. And by properly adjusting the tax system, I think it's possible to go a long way to doing that. Can income tax be abolished entirely? I wouldn't think so. I think there'll be a huge amount of opposition. But is it something that we need to talk about just to begin the conversation? And yes, I think it's a good idea. You've been fantastic today in your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.